The bustling streets of New York City pulsed with life as the first rays of sunlight peeked through the towering skyscrapers. Amidst the sea of designer suits and clicking heels, a petite figure in a threadbare coat hurried along the sidewalk, her eyes fixed on the ground. This was Lily Thompson, a 28-year-old woman whose life had been a series of cruel twists and turns. Lily's destination was the luxurious Goldstein Tower, where she worked as a cleaning lady. As she approached the gleaming glass doors, she took a deep breath, steeling herself for another day of invisibility and casual disdain from the building's wealthy occupants. Little did Lily know that today would be the day her life would change forever. As she pushed through the revolving door, her worn sneaker caught on the polished marble floor. Time seemed to slow as she stumbled forward, her cleaning supplies clattering to the ground in a cacophony of plastic and metal. The lobby fell silent, all eyes turning to the spectacle before them. Lily's cheeks burned with embarrassment as she scrambled to gather her belongings. Just as she reached for her last bottle of cleaning solution, a gleaming Italian leather shoe stepped into view, inches from her trembling hand. Well. What do we have here? A deep, mocking voice rang out. Lily's heart sank as she recognized the voice. Slowly, she lifted her gaze to meet the cold, steel-blue eyes of Alexander Blackwood, the infamous CEO of Blackwood Industries and the owner of Goldstein Tower. Alexander Blackwood was the epitome of power and arrogance. At 35, he had built an empire through ruthless business tactics and an utter disregard for those he deemed beneath him. His chiseled features and immaculate appearance belied the cruelty that lurked beneath the surface. I am sorry, Mr. Blackwood," Lily stammered, her voice barely above a whisper. "It won't happen again." A cruel smirk played across Alexander's lips as he regarded the trembling woman before him. "Oh, I'm sure it won't," he sneered. "After all, incompetence like yours is rarely tolerated in my building." The crowd of onlookers tittered nervously, their own insecurities momentarily forgotten in the face of someone else's humiliation. Lily felt tears prickling at the corners of her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. She had endured far worse in her life, and she wouldn't give this arrogant man the satisfaction of seeing her break. With as much dignity as she could muster, Lily gathered her supplies and rose to her feet. She met Alexander's gaze, her own brown eyes filled with a quiet determination that momentarily caught him off guard. "You're right, Mr. Blackwood," she said softly. "I'll do better." For a fleeting moment, something flickered in Alexander's eyes, a hint of recognition, perhaps? But as quickly as it appeared, it vanished, replaced by his usual mask of contempt. "See that you do," he snapped, turning on his heel and striding towards the elevator bank. The crowd parted before him like the Red Sea, leaving Lily alone in a sea of judgmental stares. As the elevator doors closed behind Alexander, Lily took a shaky breath and made her way to the service elevator. She had a job to do, regardless of the cruelty she faced. Little did either of them know that their paths were destined to cross again, in ways that would shake the very foundations of their lives. While Lily began her day of thankless labor, Alexander Blackwood sat in his opulent corner office, gazing out at the city he felt he owned. His mind, however, was not on the skyline or the myriad of business deals awaiting his attention. Instead, he found himself haunted by the brown eyes of the cleaning lady he had humiliated. There was something achingly familiar about those eyes, something that stirred long-buried memories he had fought hard to forget. A knock at the door interrupted his reverie. "Come in," he barked, irritated at the intrusion. His assistant, a nervous young man named Trevor, entered the room. "Mr. Blackwood, your 9 o'clock is here. It's about the Thompson estate deal." Alexander's head snapped up at the name. "Thompson?" he repeated, a strange feeling of unease settling in his stomach. "Yes, sir," Trevor confirmed. "The lawyer representing the estate is here to discuss the final details of the acquisition." Alexander waved his hand dismissively. "Send them in," he ordered, pushing aside the unsettling thoughts and focusing on the business at hand. As he prepared for the meeting, Alexander had no idea that the threads of fate were beginning to weave a tapestry that would forever change the course of his life. Meanwhile, several floors below, Lily scrubbed at a stubborn stain on the executive bathroom floor. Her muscles ached from the repetitive motion, but she refused to give up. This job, as demeaning as it was all that stood between her and homelessness. As she worked, Lily's mind wandered to the events that had led her to this point. The death of her parents in a car accident when she was just a teenager. The uncle who had taken her in, only to squander her inheritance on gambling debts. The series of dead-end jobs and broken promises that had left her with nothing but her unwavering spirit and the locket around her neck, the last reminder of a happier time. Lily's hand instinctively went to the locket, drawing comfort from its familiar weight. Inside was a faded photograph of her parents on their wedding day, their faces alight with joy and hope for the future. It was a future that had been cruelly snatched away, leaving Lily to face the world alone. A commotion in the hallway drew Lily from her melancholy thoughts. She peered out of the bathroom to see a group of executives hurrying towards the conference room, their voices hushed but excited. "Did you hear?" one of them whispered. "Blackwood's about to close the deal on the Thompson estate. It's worth millions." Lily froze, her heart pounding in her chest. Thompson estate? Could it be? Before she could process the information, a hand grabbed her arm, yanking her back into the bathroom. Lily found herself face to face with Veronica Sinclair, the head of human resources and one of the most feared women in the building. "What do you think you're doing, eavesdropping on private conversations?" Veronica hissed, her perfectly manicured nails digging into Lily's skin. I wasn't," Lily protested weakly. "I was just cleaning and dash." "Save it," Veronica cut her off. "I saw what happened in the lobby this morning. One more slip up, and you'll be out on the street. Do I make myself clear?" Lily nodded, her voice caught in her throat. Satisfied, Veronica released her arm and stalked out of the bathroom, leaving Lily trembling in her wake. As the door swung shut behind Veronica, Lily sank to the floor, her mind reeling. The Thompson estate, could it possibly be connected to her family? And if so, what did Alexander Blackwood have to do with it? For the first time in years, Lily felt a spark of hope ignite in her chest. She had always known there was more to her family's story than she had been told. Now, it seemed, the truth was within her grasp. But as she looked down at her cleaning uniform and calloused hands, reality came crashing back. She was nothing more than a cleaning lady, invisible to the likes of Alexander Blackwood and his world of power and privilege. How could she possibly uncover the truth? Little did Lily know that fate had already set the wheels in motion. The connection between her past and Alexander Blackwood's present was about to be revealed, and it would shake both their worlds to the core. As the day wore on, Lily threw herself into her work with renewed vigor. She may have been at the bottom of the social ladder, but she was determined to climb. Each floor she cleaned, each toilet she scrubbed, was a step towards reclaiming her dignity and uncovering the truth about her family. The sun was setting over the New York skyline when Lily finally finished her shift. As she made her way to the employee locker room, she overheard two executives talking in hushed tones. "Did you see Blackwood's face when he came out of that meeting?" one of them whispered. "I've never seen him look so shaken." "I heard the lawyer dropped some kind of bombshell," the other replied. "Something about a lost heir to the Thompson fortune." Lily's heart skipped a beat. A lost heir? Could it be possible? Before she could hear more, the executives rounded the corner, leaving Lily alone with her thoughts and a glimmer of hope that threatened to change everything. As she left Goldstein Tower that evening, Lily looked up at the imposing structure, its windows glowing like 1,000 eyes in the twilight. Somewhere in that tower of glass and steel, Alexander Blackwood sat brooding over secrets that could unravel both their lives. Little did either of them know that their paths were about to collide in ways they could never have imagined, setting the stage for a tale of redemption, revenge, and unexpected love that would captivate the city and beyond. The game was about to begin, and the stakes couldn't be higher. For Lily Thompson, the journey to reclaim her birthright and find justice was just beginning. For Alexander Blackwood, the carefully constructed walls of his empire were about to come crumbling down, all because of a chance encounter with a woman he had thoughtlessly humiliated. As the first stars appeared in the sky above New York City, neither Lily nor Alexander could have predicted the storms that lay ahead, storms that would test their strength, challenge their beliefs, and ultimately lead them to a truth that would change everything. The stage was set, the players were in place, and the drama was about to unfold in ways that would leave everyone breathless. The story of the arrogant man and the poor woman was about to become the talk of the town, a tale of redemption, revenge, and a love that defied all odds. But for now, as Lily made her way home to her tiny apartment and Alexander poured himself a stiff drink in his penthouse suite, they were just two souls adrift in the vast ocean of New York City, unaware of the tides of fate that were about to sweep them into each other's orbits. The night settled over the city, a blanket of darkness punctuated by the never-ending pulse of urban life. In the quiet moments before sleep claimed them, both Lily and Alexander found themselves haunted by the day's events, their minds racing with questions and possibilities. For Lily, the spark of hope that had been ignited burned bright, fueling dreams of justice and redemption. For Alexander, the unsettling feeling of recognition gnawed at his conscience, hinting at long-buried secrets that threatened to surface. As the city that never sleeps continued its relentless rhythm, the stage was set for a drama that would captivate hearts, challenge assumptions, and prove that even in the darkest of times, love and truth have the power to transform lives. The story of Lily Thompson and Alexander Blackwood was just beginning, and New York City would never be the same again. The following morning dawned bright and clear, but for Lily Thompson, the world seemed somehow different. The spark of hope ignited by yesterday's overheard conversation had grown into a flame, warming her from within and lending a new purpose to her steps as she made her way to Goldstein Tower. As she entered the lobby, Lily's eyes instinctively darted to the spot where she had fallen the day before. The memory of Alexander Blackwood's cruel smirk still stung, but today, it fueled her determination rather than her shame. She straightened her shoulders and held her head high as she made her way to the service elevator, unaware that she was being watched. From the shadows of the reception desk, Veronica Sinclair observed Lily with narrowed eyes. The head of human resources had always prided herself on her ability to read people, and something about the cleaning lady's demeanor set off alarm bells in her mind. Making a mental note to keep a closer watch on Lily, Veronica turned on her heel and strode towards the executive elevators, her stilettos clicking ominously on the marble floor. Meanwhile, 50 stories above, Alexander Blackwood sat in his office, staring unseeing at the skyline before him. He had barely slept, haunted by brown eyes that seemed to peer into his very soul and by the bombshell dropped in yesterday's meeting. The lawyer's words echoed in his mind, "Mr. Blackwood, there appears to be a surviving heir to the Thompson estate." The news had shaken Alexander to his core. The Thompson deal was supposed to be the crowning jewel in his empire, the final piece that would solidify his position as the most powerful man in New York. Now, it was threatening to unravel everything he had worked for. A knock at the door startled Alexander from his reverie. "Come in," he barked, irritation clear in his voice. Trevor, his assistant, entered hesitantly. "Mr. Blackwood, I have the preliminary report on the Thompson heir situation," he said, placing a thick folder on the desk. Alexander snatched up the folder, his eyes scanning the contents hungrily. As he read, his face grew increasingly pale. "This can't be right," he muttered, more to himself than to Trevor. "It's impossible." "Sir?" Trevor ventured cautiously. Alexander's head snapped up, his eyes blazing with a mixture of fury and fear. "Get me everything you can on Lily Thompson," he ordered. And I mean everything. Leave no stone unturned. Trevor nodded quickly and scurried out of the office, leaving Alexander alone with his thoughts and the damning information contained in the folder before him. As the morning wore on, Lily found herself assigned to clean the executive floor, a task usually reserved for more senior staff. She couldn't shake the feeling that this was somehow connected to yesterday's events, but she was determined to make the most of the opportunity to gather more information. As she dusted the mahogany-paneled hallways, Lily's ears pricked at the sound of raised voices coming from Alexander Blackwood's office. She inched closer, her heart pounding in her chest. I don't care what it takes, Alexander's voice boomed. Find a way to discredit this claim. The Thompson estate is mine, do you understand? Lily's breath caught in her throat. There it was again, the Thompson name. She was so caught up in eavesdropping that she didn't notice the approaching footsteps until it was too late. Well, what do we have here? Veronica Sinclair's icy voice cut through the air like a knife. Lily whirled around, her face flushing with guilt and fear. Miss Sinclair, I was just Dash. Save it, Veronica snapped. I warned you about eavesdropping, didn't I? Well, this time you've gone too far. You're fired. Clear out your locker and be out of the building in an hour. Tears welled up in Lily's eyes, but she blinked them back furiously. She wouldn't give Veronica the satisfaction of seeing her cry. With as much dignity as she could muster, Lily nodded and turned to leave. But fate, it seemed, had other plans. At that moment, Alexander's office door flew open, and he stormed out, his face a mask of barely contained rage. He stopped short at the sight of Lily and Veronica, his eyes widening with recognition as they landed on Lily. For a moment, time seemed to stand still. Lily found herself once again caught in Alexander's steely gaze, but this time, she saw something different there, a flicker of uncertainty, perhaps even fear. You, Alexander breathed, his voice barely above a whisper. Before Lily could respond, Veronica stepped forward. Mr. Blackwood, I was just dealing with this situation. This employee was caught eavesdropping on your private conversation. I've terminated her employment effective immediately. Alexander's eyes never left Lily's face as he spoke. No, he said, his voice regaining its usual authority. That won't be necessary, Veronica. In fact, I'd like to speak with Miss Thompson, is it? In private. Veronica's mouth fell open in shock, but she quickly recovered. Of course, Mr. Blackwood, she said smoothly, though her eyes burned with curiosity and suspicion. As Veronica retreated down the hallway, Alexander gestured for Lily to enter his office. Lily hesitated for a moment, her mind racing with possibilities and fears. But the need for answers outweighed her trepidation, and she stepped into the lion's den. The door closed behind them with a soft click, and Lily found herself alone with the man who had humiliated her just yesterday. The office was as imposing as its owner, all sleek lines and modern art, with floor-to-ceiling windows offering a breathtaking view of the city. Alexander moved behind his desk, his movements betraying a tension that hadn't been there before. He gestured for Lily to sit, then remained standing, as if unable to contain the energy thrumming through him. Miss Thompson, he began, his voice uncharacteristically uncertain. I believe we may have gotten off on the wrong foot yesterday. Lily sat rigid in her chair, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. Mr. Blackwood, I'm not sure why I'm here, but if this is about what Miss Sinclair said dash. Alexander waved his hand dismissively. Forget about Veronica. That's not why I asked you here. He paused, seeming to struggle with his next words. Miss Thompson, what do you know about your family? Your parents? The question caught Lily off guard. Of all the things she had expected him to say, this wasn't one of them. Not much, she admitted. They died when I was young. Car accident. Why do you ask? Alexander's eyes narrowed slightly, as if trying to detect any hint of deception in her words. Finding none, he sighed heavily and sank into his chair. Miss Thompson, I'm about to tell you something that may come as a shock. I ask that you hear me out completely before you react. Lily's heart began to race, hope and fear warring within her. She nodded mutely, bracing herself for whatever was to come. Your parents, Alexander began, his voice low and intense, were Jonathan and Eleanor Thompson. They were my godparents. The world seemed to tilt on its axis as Lily processed his words. What? She whispered, her voice barely audible. But, how? Why didn't I know? Alexander's face was a mask of conflicting emotions, regret, pain, and something else Lily couldn't quite identify. It's a long and complicated story, Miss Thompson. One that, I'm ashamed to say, I've spent years trying to forget. But it seems the past has a way of catching up with us. He stood abruptly, moving to the window and staring out at the city below. Your parents were good people, the best I've ever known. They took me in when my own parents died, raised me as their own. But I betrayed them. In my greed and ambition, I made choices that I can never take back. Lily felt as if she were drowning, struggling to make sense of the revelations being thrust upon her. What are you saying, Mr. Blackwood? What does this have to do with the Thompson estate I overheard you talking about? Alexander turned back to face her, his expression haunted. The Thompson estate, Miss Thompson, is your birthright. Your parents left everything to you, their only child. But when they died, and you disappeared, I saw an opportunity. I falsified documents, made it appear as if you had died alongside them. And then I set about claiming the estate for myself. The silence that followed his confession was deafening. Lily felt as if the floor had dropped out from beneath her, leaving her suspended in a void of shock and disbelief. No, she whispered, shaking her head in denial. No, this can't be true. You're lying. She shot to her feet, anger and betrayal coursing through her veins. Is this some kind of cruel joke? Yesterday you humiliate me in front of everyone, and today you spin this fantasy? Alexander stepped towards her, his hands raised in a placating gesture. I know how this must sound, Miss Thompson. But I assure you, every word is true. I have proof, documents, photographs, your parents' will. It's all in that folder on my desk. Lily's eyes darted to the folder, her fingers itching to snatch it up and devour its contents. But doubt still gnawed at her. Why? She demanded, her voice trembling with emotion. Why tell me this now? You could have kept this secret forever. A bitter laugh escaped Alexander's lips. Believe me, I tried. But it seems your parents had safeguards in place that I never knew about. A trust was set up in your name, to be revealed on your 30th birthday. That's less than 2 years away. When I tried to claim the estate, it triggered an investigation. The lawyer who came yesterday, he had evidence of your existence. Lily's mind reeled, struggling to process the implications of what she was hearing. If what Alexander was saying was true, it meant that everything she thought she knew about her life was a lie. It meant that the years of struggle and hardship she had endured were the result of this man's greed and betrayal. But it also meant that she wasn't alone in the world. That she had a heritage, a birthright, and the means to reclaim it. With shaking hands, Lily reached for the folder on Alexander's desk. As she opened it, she gasped at the sight of a photograph paperclipped to the first page. It showed a smiling couple, the woman with Lily's own warm brown eyes, the man with a kind face that seemed oddly familiar. And between them, held lovingly in their arms, was a baby girl with a tuft of dark hair and a toothless grin. Tears streamed down Lily's face as she traced her fingers over the image of the parents she could barely remember. "Why?" she whispered again, her voice choked with emotion. "Why did you do this to me?" Alexander's shoulders sagged, the weight of his guilt seeming to physically press down on him. "I was young, angry, and filled with a sense of entitlement," he said softly. "Your parents had given me everything, but I wanted more. When they died, I saw a chance to take what I believed should have been mine all along. I told myself that you would be better off, that a life of wealth and privilege would only spoil you." He laughed bitterly. "I see now how wrong I was. You've become everything your parents would have been proud of: kind, resilient, hardworking. Everything I'm not." Lily looked up from the photograph, her eyes blazing with a mixture of anger and determination. "You're right about one thing, Mr. Blackwood. I am everything my parents would have been proud of. And I intend to honor their memory by reclaiming what's rightfully mine." She stood, clutching the folder to her chest like a shield. "I don't know what happens next, but I promise you this: I will not rest until the truth is known and justice is served. Not just for me, but for the memory of my parents and for everyone else you've wronged in your quest for power." Alexander nodded, a look of resignation settling over his features. "I understand, Miss Thompson. And I'll do whatever it takes to make this right. Even if it means losing everything." As Lily turned to leave, her hand on the doorknob, Alexander spoke once more. "Lily," he said softly, using her first name for the first time. "I know I have no right to ask this, but can you ever forgive me?" Lily paused, her back to the man who had caused her so much pain. Without turning, she spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. "I don't know, Mr. Blackwood. But I do know this: forgiveness is earned, not given. If you truly want to make amends, you'll have to prove it with your actions, not just your words." With that, she opened the door and stepped out into the hallway, leaving Alexander Blackwood alone with the weight of his sins. As the door closed behind her, Lily leaned against the wall, her legs trembling beneath her. The folder in her arms held the key to her past and, potentially, her future. But with that knowledge came a heavy burden: the need for justice, for truth, and for healing. Little did Lily know that her confrontation with Alexander Blackwood was just the beginning. The revelations of that day would set in motion a chain of events that would shake the foundations of New York's elite society, test the limits of forgiveness, and perhaps, just perhaps, lead to an unexpected chance at redemption for both the arrogant man and the woman he had wronged. As Lily made her way to the elevator, her mind swirling with questions and possibilities, she failed to notice the figure lurking in the shadows. Veronica Sinclair had heard every word of the conversation between Lily and Alexander, and her cunning mind was already formulating a plan to use this information to her advantage. The stage was set for a drama that would captivate the city, a tale of lost fortunes, buried secrets, and the transformative power of truth. For Lily Thompson, the journey to reclaim her birthright had only just begun, and the path ahead was fraught with challenges she could never have imagined. As the elevator doors closed, whisking Lily away from the executive floor and towards an uncertain future, the wheels of fate continued to turn. In the coming days and weeks, alliances would be forged and broken, long-buried truths would come to light, and the lives of everyone involved would be changed forever. The story of the arrogant man and the poor woman was far from over. In fact, it was only just beginning. The New York sky was ablaze with the fiery hues of sunset as Lily Thompson stumbled out of Goldstein Tower, her mind reeling from the earth-shattering revelations of the day. The folder clutched tightly to her chest felt like both a lifeline and a ticking time bomb, its contents threatening to upend everything she thought she knew about herself and her place in the world. As she made her way through the bustling streets, oblivious to the curious glances thrown her way by passing strangers, Lily's thoughts were a chaotic whirlwind of emotions and questions. How could she reconcile the cruel, arrogant man who had humiliated her just yesterday with the guilt-ridden figure who had confessed to stealing her birthright? And more importantly, what was she going to do with this newfound knowledge? Lost in her tumultuous thoughts, Lily didn't notice the sleek black sedan that had been tailing her since she left Goldstein Tower. Inside the car, Veronica Sinclair's perfectly manicured nails tapped an impatient rhythm on the leather armrest as she observed her quarry. "Keep following her," Veronica instructed the driver, her voice cold and calculating. "I want to know exactly where our little Cinderella lives." As Lily turned down a narrow side street lined with dilapidated brownstones, Veronica's lips curled into a predatory smile. Well, she murmured. "Isn't this interesting?" Meanwhile, back at Goldstein Tower, Alexander Blackwood stood at his office window, watching the sun sink below the horizon. The city he had once viewed as his personal kingdom now seemed alien and hostile, a maze of steel and glass hiding secrets that threatened to destroy everything he had built. A soft knock at the door pulled him from his brooding thoughts. "Come in," he called, his voice lacking its usual authoritative edge. Trevor entered, his face a mask of concern. "Mr. Blackwood, I have the additional information you requested on Lily Thompson." Alexander turned, his eyes falling on the slim file in Trevor's hands. "And?" he prompted, dreading the answer. Trevor shifted uncomfortably. "Sir, it's not good. Miss Thompson's life has been difficult, to say the least." As Trevor began to detail the hardships Lily had endured, the years in foster care, the struggle to put herself through community college, the string of low-paying jobs, Alexander felt each word like a physical blow. This was the life he had condemned her to, all because of his greed and ambition. "That's enough," Alexander said abruptly, unable to bear any more. "Thank you, Trevor. You can go." Once alone, Alexander sank into his chair, his head in his hands. For the first time in years, he allowed himself to remember the people Lily's parents had been: kind, loving, selfless. Everything he had tried so hard not to be in his relentless pursuit of power and wealth. "What have I done?" he whispered to the empty room. As night fell over the city, three souls wrestled with the consequences of long-buried secrets and the uncertain path that lay ahead. Lily, curled up on her threadbare couch in her tiny studio apartment, pored over the contents of the folder for what felt like the 100th time. Each document, each photograph, painted a picture of the life she should have had, a life of love, security, and opportunity. Tears streamed down her face as she traced her fingers over her parents' smiling faces, trying to commit every detail to memory. But as the initial shock began to wear off, a steely determination took its place. Lily Thompson had survived foster homes, workplace discrimination, and crushing poverty. She had clawed her way up from nothing, armed with nothing but her own grit and determination. And now, faced with the greatest challenge of her life, she would not back down. "I will make you proud," she whispered to the photograph of her parents. "I promise." Across town, in his luxurious penthouse apartment, Alexander Blackwood nursed a glass of expensive scotch, his mind a battlefield of conflicting emotions. On one side stood the ruthless businessman who had built an empire on cunning and cutthroat tactics. On the other, a shadow of the young man he had once been: idealistic, grateful, and eager to make his godparents proud. As he stared into the amber liquid, Alexander found himself at a crossroads. He could fight Lily's claim, use every legal trick and corporate maneuver at his disposal to maintain his grip on the Thompson fortune. Or he could do the right thing, the thing Jonathan and Eleanor Thompson would have expected of the boy they had raised as their own. The choice, he realized with a mix of fear and exhilaration, would define not just his future, but the very essence of who he was as a man. And in a modest but well-appointed home in the suburbs, Veronica Sinclair sat at her dining room table, surrounded by printouts and handwritten notes. Her sharp mind worked overtime, piecing together the fragments of conversation she had overheard and the information she had gleaned from her impromptu surveillance of Lily. A slow, calculating smile spread across Veronica's face as a plan began to take shape. In the unfolding drama between Alexander Blackwood and Lily Thompson, she saw an opportunity, not just for personal gain, but for the ultimate revenge against the man who had overlooked her for promotion time and time again. "Oh, Alexander," she purred to herself. "You have no idea what's coming." As the city slept, the stage was set for a confrontation that would shake the very foundations of New York's high society and force each player to confront the truth about themselves and the choices that had led them to this moment. The next morning dawned bright and clear, a stark contrast to the emotional turmoil roiling within Lily as she made her way back to Goldstein Tower. She had spent a sleepless night weighing her options and had finally come to a decision. She would confront Alexander Blackwood one last time before taking legal action to reclaim her birthright. As she strode through the lobby, head held high, Lily was a far cry from the meat-cleaning lady of just 2 days ago. The knowledge of her true identity burned within her like a flame, lending strength to her steps and fire to her eyes. She was so focused on her mission that she failed to notice the whispers and curious glances that followed in her wake. News of her dramatic meeting with Alexander Blackwood had spread through the office grapevine like wildfire, fueled by Veronica Sinclair's carefully planted rumors. Just as Lily reached the bank of elevators, a familiar voice called out, stopping her in her tracks. "Well, if it isn't Cinderella herself," Veronica Sinclair purred, sauntering over with a predatory grace. "I hear you've had quite the fairy tale revelation, my dear." Lily stiffened, her hand instinctively tightening on the strap of her bag where she kept the precious folder of documents. "Miss Sinclair," she acknowledged coolly. "I'm afraid I don't know what you're talking about." Veronica's smile was sharp enough to cut glass. "Oh, I think you do. In fact, I think you and I need to have a little chat. Why don't you join me in my office?" It wasn't a request, and Lily knew it. Steeling herself, she nodded and followed Veronica to a plush corner office with a view rivaling Alexander's. As soon as the door closed behind them, Veronica's facade of politeness dropped. "Let's cut to the chase, shall we?" she said, leaning against her desk. "I know all about your little tête-à-tête with Alexander yesterday. I know about the Thompson estate, and I know about your, shall we say, complicated history with our illustrious CEO." Lily's heart raced, but she kept her face impassive. "And what do you intend to do with this information, Ms. Sinclair?" Veronica's laugh was cold and mirthless. "Oh, my dear, it's not about what I intend to do. It's about what you're going to do for me." As Veronica laid out her proposition, her silence in exchange for a substantial cut of the Thompson estate once Lily claimed it, Lily felt a curious mix of anger and pity. This woman, with all her power and prestige, was still driven by the basest of human instincts, greed and jealousy. "I'm afraid I'll have to decline your generous offer, Miss Sinclair," Lily said quietly when Veronica had finished speaking. "Whatever happens with the Thompson estate, it will be handled legally and ethically. I won't be party to blackmail or extortion." For a moment, Veronica's carefully composed mask slipped, revealing a flash of fury that made Lily take an involuntary step back. But as quickly as it appeared, it was gone, replaced by a cold smile. "I had so hoped we could do this the easy way," Veronica sighed, reaching for her phone. "But I suppose we'll have to do it the hard way. I wonder how the board will react when they learn of Alexander's little indiscretion? Or perhaps the press would be interested in this juicy scandal?" Before Lily could respond, a deep voice cut through the tension-filled room. "I don't think that will be necessary, Veronica." Both women turned to see Alexander Blackwood standing in the doorway, his face a mask of controlled anger. "I think it's time we all had a frank discussion, don't you?" The next hour was a whirlwind of accusations, revelations, and thinly veiled threats as the three players in this high-stakes drama laid their cards on the table. Veronica, caught off guard by Alexander's unexpected appearance, quickly tried to spin the situation to her advantage, portraying herself as a loyal employee merely looking out for the company's best interests. Alexander, however, was having none of it. With a coldness that reminded Lily of their first encounter, he systematically dismantled Veronica's arguments, revealing that he had long been aware of her machinations and manipulations within the company. "Your services will no longer be required at Goldstein Enterprises, Miss Sinclair," Alexander said finally, his voice laden with authority. "I suggest you clear out your office immediately." For a moment, Veronica looked as if she might argue, but something in Alexander's eyes made her think better of it. With a final venomous glare at both Alexander and Lily, she stormed out of the office, the click of her heels fading down the hallway. In the sudden silence that followed, Lily found herself alone with Alexander once again. The air between them was charged with unspoken words and the weight of their shared history. "I owe you an apology," Alexander said quietly, surprising Lily with the sincerity in his voice. "Not just for yesterday, or for the years of deception, but for the person I've become. The person your parents would have been ashamed to call their godson." Lily studied him closely, searching for any sign of the arrogant, cruel man who had mocked her just days ago. Instead, she saw only remorse and a glimmer of something that might have been hope. "An apology is a start," she said carefully. "But it doesn't undo the years of hardship, the opportunities lost, the memories of my parents that were stolen from me." Alexander nodded, his shoulders sagging under the weight of his guilt. "I know. And I know that no amount of money or power can ever make up for what I've done. But I want to try, Lily. I want to make things right, not just legally, but personally." He reached into his jacket and pulled out a thick envelope. "This contains everything, all the documents proving your identity, your claim to the Thompson estate, and a letter. From your parents to you, to be opened on your 18th birthday. A birthday that, thanks to my actions, you never got to celebrate with them." With trembling hands, Lily took the envelope. The urge to tear it open then and there was almost overwhelming, but she resisted. This moment, this connection to her parents, was too precious to be rushed. "Thank you," she said softly, looking up at Alexander with eyes shining with unshed tears. This means more than you can know." Alexander's smile was tinged with sadness. "It's the least I can do. And Lily, I hope that someday, you might be able to forgive me. Not for my sake, but for your own. Your parents, they were the most forgiving people I've ever known. It was one of the many things that made them so extraordinary." As Lily left Goldstein Tower that day, her head spinning with the events of the morning, she felt as if she were standing on the precipice of a new life. The path ahead was uncertain, filled with legal battles, emotional revelations, and the daunting task of reclaiming a heritage she had never known was hers. But for the first time in as long as she could remember, Lily didn't feel alone. The weight of the envelope in her bag was a tangible connection to the parents she had lost, a bridge between her past and her future. As she walked down the busy New York street, Lily found herself smiling. Whatever challenges lay ahead, she would face them with the strength and grace her parents had passed down to her. And perhaps, in time, she might even find it in her heart to forgive the man whose actions had shaped the course of her life. Little did Lily know that her journey was far from over. The revelations of the past few days had set in motion a chain of events that would continue to test her resolve, challenge her beliefs, and perhaps even open her heart to unexpected possibilities. As the sun climbed higher in the sky, casting its warm glow over the city, 3 lives stood at a crossroads. Lily Thompson, poised to reclaim her birthright and discover the truth about her past. Alexander Blackwood, grappling with the consequences of his actions and the possibility of redemption. And Veronica Sinclair, her carefully constructed world crumbling around her, nursing a bitter desire for revenge. The stage was set for a drama that would captivate New York's high society, a tale of lost fortunes, buried secrets, and the transformative power of forgiveness. As Lily disappeared into the crowd, her head held high and her heart full of newfound hope, the city seemed to hold its breath, waiting to see how this extraordinary story would unfold. In the coming weeks and months, alliances would be forged and broken, long-buried truths would come to light, and the lives of everyone involved would be changed in ways they could never have imagined. The story of the arrogant man and the poor woman was far from over. In fact, it was about to take a turn that would leave everyone breathless. As night fell over New York City, 3 souls lay awake, each contemplating the twists of fate that had brought them to this moment. Lily, curled up on her small bed, ran her fingers over the sealed envelope containing her parents' letter, torn between the desire to read it immediately and the fear of the emotions it might unleash. Alexander, in his luxurious penthouse, stared out at the glittering cityscape, wondering if it was too late to become the man his godparents had believed he could be. And Veronica, in her suddenly empty apartment, her prized possessions packed away in boxes, plotted her revenge against those who had dared to cross her. Little did they know that their paths were destined to cross again, in ways that would test their strength, challenge their convictions, and perhaps, just perhaps, lead to an unexpected chance at redemption for them all. As the city that never sleeps continued its relentless rhythm, the next chapter of this extraordinary tale was about to begin, promising revelations, confrontations, and perhaps even a spark of unexpected romance that would set hearts racing and tongues wagging throughout New York's elite circles. The game was far from over. In fact, it had only just begun. The weeks following the dramatic confrontation at Goldstein Tower passed in a whirlwind of activity for Lily Thompson. Armed with the documents Alexander had provided, she had engaged the services of Regina Hawthorne, a formidable attorney known for taking on high-profile cases against corporate giants. Together, they had begun the complex process of legally establishing Lily's identity and her claim to the Thompson estate. As autumn painted Central Park in shades of gold and crimson, Lily found herself spending more and more time in the law offices of Hawthorne and Associates, poring over legal documents and strategizing their next moves. It was during one such late-night session that Regina dropped a bombshell that would once again shake the foundations of Lily's world. "Lily," Regina said, her normally stern face softening with sympathy, "there's something you need to see." She slid a manila folder across the desk, her eyes never leaving Lily's face. With trembling hands, Lily opened the folder. Inside was a newspaper clipping, yellowed with age, with a headline that made her blood run cold: "Tragic accident or foul play?" Questions surround deaths of prominent philanthropists. As Lily read the article, her vision blurred with tears. The reporter raised questions about the car accident that had claimed her parents' lives, hinting at brake tampering and citing anonymous sources who claimed the Thompsons had been about to expose a major financial scandal. What does this mean?" Lily whispered, looking up at Regina with wide, shocked eyes. Regina's face was grim. "It means, my dear, that we may be dealing with more than just a case of inheritance fraud. If there's any truth to these allegations, your parents' deaths may not have been an accident at all." The implications of this new information hit Lily like a physical blow. Could it be possible that her parents had been murdered? And if so, who was responsible? The questions swirled in her mind, each more terrifying than the last. As if reading her thoughts, Regina leaned forward, her voice low and urgent. "Lily, we need to tread very carefully from here on out. If there are people out there who were willing to kill to keep your parents quiet, they might not hesitate to do the same to you if they realize you're close to uncovering the truth." Lily nodded, a steely determination replacing the shock in her eyes. "I understand the risks, Regina. But I've come too far to back down now. Whatever the truth is, I need to know it, for my parents' sake, and for my own." As Lily left Regina's office that night, the crisp autumn air did little to clear her troubled mind. She was so lost in thought that she almost didn't notice the sleek black car that pulled up alongside her until a familiar voice called out her name. "Lily? Can we talk?" She turned to see Alexander Blackwood leaning out of the car window, his face etched with concern. For a moment, Lily hesitated. Despite the steps Alexander had taken to make amends, she still found it hard to trust the man who had deceived her for so long. But something in his expression, a mixture of guilt, worry, and genuine care, made her pause. With a small nod, she slid into the back seat beside him. As the car pulled away from the curb, an awkward silence settled between them. It was Alexander who finally broke it, his voice uncharacteristically hesitant. "I heard from my lawyers that you've hired Regina Hawthorne," he said, glancing at Lily. "She's formidable. A good choice." Lily raised an eyebrow. "I'm surprised you're not more concerned, given that she's preparing to take you to court." Alexander's laugh was hollow. "Lily, I told you before, I want to make this right. I'm not going to fight you on this. Whatever Regina advises, whatever the courts decide, I'll abide by it." His words should have brought Lily comfort, but instead, they only intensified the turmoil in her mind. Taking a deep breath, she decided to take a risk. "Alexander," she said quietly, "what do you know about my parents' death?" The change in Alexander's demeanor was immediate and alarming. His face paled, and his hands gripped the leather seat so tightly his knuckles turned white. What do you mean?" he stammered, unable to meet Lily's gaze. With shaking hands, Lily pulled out the newspaper clipping Regina had given her. "This article, it suggests their deaths might not have been an accident. Did you know about this?" Alexander's reaction told Lily everything she needed to know. His eyes widened in shock as he scanned the article, and when he finally looked up at her, his face was a mask of anguish. "Lily, I had no idea," he whispered. "I swear to you, if I had known." "Known what, Alexander?" Lily pressed, her heart pounding. "What aren't you telling me?" For a long moment, Alexander was silent, seemingly wrestling with some internal struggle. When he finally spoke, his voice was heavy with regret. "Your parents, they came to me a few days before the accident. They were worried, said they had discovered something big, something that could bring down some very powerful people. I didn't take them seriously. I was too caught up in my own ambitions, too focused on the deal I was trying to close." Tears streamed down Lily's face as she listened, each word like a knife to her heart. "Who?" she demanded. "Who were they going to expose?" Alexander shook his head. "They didn't give me details. Said it was safer if I didn't know. But they did mention a name, Roderick Blackstone." The name meant nothing to Lily, but she could see from Alexander's expression that it held great significance. "Who is he?" she asked. "One of the most powerful men in New York," Alexander replied, his voice barely above a whisper. "A Wall Street titan with connections in politics, law enforcement, everywhere. If he's involved in this..." He trailed off, but Lily understood the implication. They were dealing with forces far more dangerous than either of them had imagined. As the car pulled up in front of Lily's apartment building, an uncomfortable silence settled between them. The weight of the revelations hung heavy in the air, along with the unspoken question of what they would do with this newfound knowledge. "Lily," Alexander said as she reached for the door handle, "please be careful. If Blackstone is involved, you could be in serious danger." Lily paused, turning back to look at the man who had once been her enemy but now seemed to be the only person who truly understood the gravity of her situation. "What about you?" she asked softly. "Aren't you in danger too, now that you know?" A sad smile played at the corners of Alexander's mouth. "I've been living with the weight of my guilt for years, Lily. If helping you find the truth about your parents' deaths puts me in danger, well, maybe that's the price I have to pay for my past mistakes." For the first time since learning of Alexander's betrayal, Lily felt a flicker of something other than anger or distrust towards him. It wasn't quite forgiveness, not yet, but it was a start. "Thank you," she said quietly, "for telling me the truth. And be careful, Alexander. Whatever mistakes you've made, you don't deserve to die for them." With that, she slipped out of the car and hurried into her building, leaving Alexander to watch her go with a mixture of admiration and regret. As Lily entered her tiny apartment, her mind was reeling from the night's revelations. She collapsed onto her worn sofa, the weight of everything she had learned pressing down on her like a physical force. Her eyes fell on the still unopened envelope containing her parents' letter, sitting on her coffee table where it had been since the day Alexander gave it to her. With trembling hands, she picked it up. She had been saving it, waiting for the right moment, but now she realized there might never be a perfect time. Taking a deep breath, she broke the seal and unfolded the pages within. "My dearest Lily," the letter began in her mother's elegant handwriting. As Lily read, tears streaming down her face, she felt as if she could hear her parents' voices, filled with love and hope for the future they would never get to share with her. But it was the final paragraph that made Lily's breath catch in her throat. "If you're reading this, my darling girl, it means that something has happened to your father and me. Know that we love you more than life itself, and that everything we've done has been to secure a better future for you. There are forces at work in this world, Lily, dark forces that we've been fighting against. If we're gone, it means our fight isn't over. Trust in yourself, and in the goodness of others. And remember, the truth will always come to light, no matter how deep it's buried." As Lily folded the letter with shaking hands, she felt a fierce determination rise within her. Her parents had died fighting against injustice, and she would honor their memory by finishing what they had started. Wiping away her tears, Lily reached for her phone and dialed Regina's number. "Regina? It's Lily. There's been a new development. We need to talk." As she hung up the phone, Lily's gaze fell on a framed photo of her parents that she had found among the documents Alexander had given her. Their smiling faces seemed to give her strength, reminding her of the love and courage that ran in her blood. "I'll make you proud," she whispered to their frozen images. "I promise." Little did Lily know that her vow would set in motion a chain of events that would shake New York society to its core, exposing long-buried secrets and forcing everyone involved to confront the truth about themselves and the choices that had led them to this moment. As dawn broke over the city, casting a rosy glow over the skyline, 3 people lay awake, each grappling with the weight of their choices and the uncertain path that lay ahead. Lily, curled up on her sofa, her parents' letter clutched to her chest, steeled herself for the battle to come. She knew now that she was fighting for more than just her inheritance. She was fighting for justice, for truth, and for the memory of the parents she had barely known. Alexander, in his penthouse apartment, paced restlessly, torn between his growing feelings for Lily and the fear of what his past actions might cost them both. He knew he had to make a choice, continue down the path of redemption, no matter the personal cost, or retreat back into the safety of his wealth and power. And in a lavish brownstone on the Upper East Side, Roderick Blackstone sat in his study, a glass of scotch in hand, contemplating the phone call he had just received. The carefully constructed walls of lies and deception that had protected him for years were beginning to crumble, and he knew that drastic action would be necessary to maintain his grip on power. As the city began to stir, coming to life with the promise of a new day, none of them could have predicted the storms that lay ahead, storms that would test their strength, challenge their beliefs, and ultimately lead them to a truth that would change everything. The stage was set for a drama that would captivate the city and beyond. Secrets would be revealed, alliances would be tested, and hearts would be broken and mended. The story of Lily Thompson, the poor woman who had been mocked and underestimated, was about to become a tale of triumph against impossible odds. But the path to justice and redemption would not be an easy one. In the weeks and months to come, Lily would face challenges that would test her resolve to its very limits. She would uncover betrayals that would shake her faith in humanity and forge unexpected alliances that would restore it. And through it all, the undeniable connection between Lily and Alexander would continue to grow, challenging them both to confront their feelings and the possibility of a love born from the ashes of betrayal and redeemed by the power of forgiveness. As the sun climbed higher in the sky, bathing the city in golden light, Lily stood at her window, gazing out at the world that had once seemed so vast and impersonal. Now, armed with the truth about her past and the love of the parents she had lost, she felt ready to take on whatever challenges lay ahead. Little did she know that her journey was far from over. The revelations of the past few weeks were just the beginning of a story that would captivate the city, a tale of lost fortunes, buried secrets, and the transformative power of love and forgiveness. As Lily turned away from the window, ready to face the new day and whatever it might bring, she couldn't shake the feeling that somewhere out there, her parents were watching over her, guiding her steps and lending her their strength. With a deep breath and a determined set to her shoulders, Lily Thompson stepped out into the world, ready to claim her destiny and uncover the truth, no matter the cost. The game was far from over. In fact, it had only just begun. The crisp autumn air carried a hint of change as Lily made her way to Regina Hawthorne's office later that morning. Her mind was a whirlwind of emotions, determination, fear, anger, and a glimmer of hope that she couldn't quite extinguish. As she entered the sleek, modern offices of Hawthorne and Associates, Lily was immediately struck by the tense atmosphere. Regina's usually unflappable assistant looked visibly shaken, and hushed whispers followed Lily as she made her way to the conference room. Inside, she found Regina deep in conversation with a tall, distinguished-looking man Lily had never seen before. They both looked up as she entered, and Lily was taken aback by the mix of emotions she saw flash across Regina's face: relief, concern, and something that looked almost like fear. "Lily," Regina said, her voice carefully controlled. "I'm glad you're here. There's been a development. This is Detective James Morrison from the NYPD Cold Case Unit." Lily's heart began to race as she shook the detective's hand. "Cold Case Unit?" she repeated, her voice barely above a whisper. "Does this mean?" Detective Morrison nodded gravely. "Ms. Thompson, in light of new evidence, we've reopened the investigation into your parents' deaths. And I have to tell you, what we've uncovered so far is troubling, to say the least." For the next hour, Lily listened in stunned silence as Detective Morrison laid out the fruits of their investigation. Forensic re-examination of the wreckage had indeed revealed signs of tampering with the brakes. Financial records showed large, unexplained transfers in the days leading up to the accident. And most damning of all, several key witnesses from the original investigation had mysteriously died or disappeared in the years since. "Ms. Thompson," Detective Morrison said, his eyes filled with a mixture of compassion and determination, "I want you to know that we're taking this very seriously. Your parents' case has exposed a web of corruption that goes far beyond anything we initially suspected. We're talking about influential people in business, politics, even law enforcement." Lily's mind reeled as she tried to process everything she was hearing. Her parents hadn't just been murdered, they had been silenced as part of a massive conspiracy. And now, years later, she found herself at the center of a storm that threatened to expose it all. "What happens now?" she asked, her voice stronger than she felt. Regina and Detective Morrison exchanged a look that sent a chill down Lily's spine. It was Regina who finally spoke, her voice uncharacteristically gentle. "Lily, with the case reopened and the media starting to sniff around, things are going to get complicated. There are powerful people who would prefer that the truth stays buried. We believe you may be in danger." Detective Morrison nodded in agreement. "We'd like to place you under police protection, Ms. Thompson. At least until we can get a better handle on the extent of the threat." Lily's first instinct was to refuse. The thought of hiding away while others fought her battles for her went against everything she believed in. But as she opened her mouth to protest, her mother's words from the letter flashed through her mind: trust in yourself and in the goodness of others. Taking a deep breath, Lily nodded. Okay, she said quietly. I'll do it. But I want to be kept in the loop. This is my fight too, and I won't be sidelined. As they worked out the details of her protection, Lily's thoughts drifted to Alexander. Despite everything that had happened between them, she couldn't shake the feeling that he was somehow key to unraveling this mystery. And more than that, she realized with a start, she was worried about him. Detective Morrison, she said suddenly, interrupting a discussion about safe houses, what about Alexander Blackwood? He's involved in this too. Could he be in danger? Detective Morrison's expression grew serious. We've been keeping an eye on Mr. Blackwood, Ms. Thompson. While he's not under official protection, we are monitoring his movements. Do you have reason to believe he might be in immediate danger? Lily hesitated, unsure how much to reveal about her recent conversation with Alexander. He told me some things. About my parents, about a man named Roderick Blackstone. I think he might know more than he's letting on. At the mention of Blackstone's name, both Regina and Detective Morrison visibly tensed. They exchanged a loaded glance before the detective turned back to Lily. Ms. Thompson, the name you just mentioned, it's come up in our investigation. Multiple times. If Mr. Blackwood has information about Roderick Blackstone's involvement in this case, we need to speak with him immediately. As if on cue, Lily's phone buzzed with an incoming text. Her heart skipped a beat when she saw it was from Alexander. Need to talk. It's urgent. Meet me at the Riverside Park Pier. 1 hour. Lily looked up from her phone, her mind racing. He wants to meet me, she said, showing the text to Detective Morrison. This could be our chance to get the information we need. Regina shook her head vehemently. Absolutely not. It's too dangerous. We have no idea who might be watching or listening. But Detective Morrison looked thoughtful. Actually, he said slowly, this could work to our advantage. If we set it up right, we could use this meeting to gather crucial evidence. What followed was a flurry of activity as a plan was hastily put together. Lily would meet Alexander as requested, but she would be wired and under constant surveillance. A team of undercover officers would be stationed around the pier, ready to intervene at the first sign of trouble. As Lily prepared to leave, Regina pulled her aside, her face etched with concern. Lily, are you sure about this? You don't have to do this, you know. We can find another way. Lily smiled softly, touched by the older woman's concern. I'm sure, Regina. This isn't just about me anymore. It's about justice for my parents and for anyone else who's been hurt by these people. I have to do this. An hour later, Lily found herself walking along the Riverside Park Pier, her heart pounding in her chest. The wire taped to her skin felt uncomfortable and foreign, a constant reminder of the high stakes of this meeting. She spotted Alexander long before he saw her. He was standing at the far end of the pier, his tall figure silhouetted against the setting sun. As she approached, she could see the tension in his shoulders, the way his hands gripped the railing so tightly his knuckles were white. Alexander, she called softly as she drew near. He turned, and the look on his face made Lily's breath catch in her throat. Gone was the arrogant, self-assured man she had first met. In his place was someone haunted, vulnerable, and unmistakably afraid. Lily, he breathed, relief evident in his voice. Thank God you came. I wasn't sure you would. You said it was urgent, Lily replied, trying to keep her voice steady. What's going on, Alexander? He glanced around nervously before leaning in close. "We're in danger, Lily. All of us. I've uncovered something big. About your parents, about Blackstone, about the whole damn system. It goes deeper than we ever imagined." Lily's heart raced, both from his words and from his proximity. "Tell me," she urged. Alexander took a deep breath. "Your parents, they weren't just investigating financial fraud. They had evidence of a massive conspiracy involving insider trading, money laundering, even connections to organized crime. And Blackstone, he's at the center of it all." As Alexander continued to speak, laying out a web of corruption and deceit that made Lily's head spin, she found herself moving closer to him, drawn in by the intensity of his words and the genuine fear in his eyes. "I've gathered as much evidence as I could," Alexander said, reaching into his jacket. "It's all here, on this drive. Bank records, emails, recorded conversations. Enough to bring down Blackstone and his entire network." Just as he pulled out a small flash drive, a sharp crack split the air. Alexander's eyes widened in shock and pain, and Lily watched in horror as a crimson stain began to spread across his chest. "Alexander," she screamed, catching him as he stumbled forward. Chaos erupted around them. Shouts and more gunshots filled the air as the undercover officers sprang into action. Lily barely registered any of it, her entire world narrowed down to the man bleeding in her arms. "Lily," Alexander gasped, his hand fumbling to press the flash drive into her palm. "Take it. Use it. Make things right." "No," Lily sobbed, pressing her hand against his wound in a futile attempt to stop the bleeding. "Stay with me, Alexander. Please." His eyes, filled with a mixture of pain and something that looked achingly like love, locked onto hers. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "For everything. I hope, someday, you can forgive me." As the paramedics finally reached them, pushing Lily aside to work on Alexander, she clutched the flash drive to her chest, her mind reeling from the sudden turn of events. In the span of a few short minutes, everything had changed. The truth about her parents' deaths was finally within reach, but at what cost? And as she watched Alexander being loaded into an ambulance, his life hanging by a thread, Lily realized with startling clarity that somewhere along the way, against all odds and reason, she had fallen in love with the man who had once been her greatest enemy. As the ambulance sped away, its sirens wailing into the gathering dusk, Lily stood on the blood-stained pier, the weight of the flash drive in her hand a stark reminder of the burden she now carried. The truth that had cost so much was now in her possession, but the path ahead was more uncertain than ever. Detective Morrison appeared at her side, his face grim. "Miss Thompson, we need to get you to a safe location immediately. This attack proves that whoever is behind this conspiracy is willing to go to extreme lengths to keep their secrets." Lily nodded numbly, allowing herself to be led away from the scene. But as she climbed into the waiting police car, her shock began to give way to a steely determination. Alexander had risked everything to get her this information. Her parents had died trying to expose the truth. She owed it to all of them to see this through to the end, no matter the personal cost. As the car pulled away from Riverside Park, carrying her towards an uncertain future, Lily made a silent vow. She would uncover the truth, expose the corruption that had claimed so many lives, and somehow find a way to save the man who had unexpectedly captured her heart. The game had changed, the stakes higher than ever. But Lily Thompson, the once mocked cleaning lady turned heiress and now potential savior of justice, was ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. The final act of this extraordinary drama was about to unfold, and New York City would never be the same again. The harsh fluorescent lights of Mount Sinai Hospital cast an eerie glow over Lily's pale face as she paced the waiting room, her eyes never straying far from the doors leading to the intensive care unit. It had been 6 hours since Alexander Blackwood had been rushed into emergency surgery, 6 hours of agonizing uncertainty that felt like an eternity. Detective Morrison stood nearby, his watchful gaze scanning the room for any potential threats. The attack on the pier had shaken everyone, bringing home the reality of the danger they were facing. "Ms. Thompson," Morrison said gently, breaking the tense silence. "You should try to get some rest. We can have an officer notify you if there's any change in Mr. Blackwood's condition." Lily shook her head, her voice hoarse from unshed tears. "I can't leave him, Detective. Not now." As if in response to her words, the doors to the ICU swung open and a tired-looking surgeon emerged. Lily's heart leapt into her throat as she rushed forward. "Doctor, how is he? Is Alexander going to be all right?" The surgeon's face was grave, but there was a glimmer of cautious optimism in his eyes. "Mr. Blackwood made it through the surgery, but he's not out of the woods yet. The next 24 hours will be critical. He's strong, though, and he's fighting hard." Relief washed over Lily like a tidal wave, leaving her weak-kneed and trembling. Alexander was alive. There was still hope. As the surgeon continued to explain Alexander's condition and the road to recovery ahead, Lily's mind drifted to the flash drive clutched tightly in her hand. In the chaos following the shooting, she hadn't had a chance to examine its contents. But she knew that within its tiny circuits lay the key to unraveling the entire conspiracy, and potentially the means to protect Alexander and herself from further harm. "Detective Morrison," Lily said, turning to the officer as the doctor left. "We need to look at what's on this drive. Now." Morrison nodded, his expression serious. "Agreed. But not here. We've set up a secure location where we can examine the evidence safely. Are you ready to go?" Lily cast one last longing look at the ICU doors, her heart torn between staying with Alexander and pursuing the truth he had risked his life to uncover. Finally, with a deep breath, she nodded. "Let's go. It's time to finish this." The safe house turned out to be a nondescript brownstone in Brooklyn, its unremarkable exterior belying the hive of activity within. As Lily entered, she was struck by the array of high-tech equipment and the number of intense-looking individuals hunched over computers. Regina Hawthorne was waiting for them, her usual polished appearance slightly rumpled, betraying the long hours she had been working. "Lily," she said, embracing the younger woman. "Thank God you're all right. When we heard about the shooting..." Lily returned the hug, drawing strength from the older woman's concern. "I'm okay, Regina. But we need to act fast. Alexander, he might not have much time." With grim determination, they gathered around a central computer as a tech expert inserted the flash drive. For a moment, nothing happened, and Lily felt her heart sink. Had they risked everything for nothing? But then the screen came to life, flooding with documents, spreadsheets, and audio files. As they began to sift through the information, the true scope of the conspiracy began to emerge, leaving everyone in the room stunned. It wasn't just financial fraud or corporate espionage. The web of corruption extended to the highest levels of government, law enforcement, and the judiciary. Roderick Blackstone, it turned out, was merely the public face of a much larger, more insidious organization that had been pulling strings behind the scenes for decades. "My God," Regina breathed, her face pale as she scanned a particularly damning email chain. "This goes beyond anything we could have imagined. If this gets out, it will shake the very foundations of our society." Detective Morrison, who had been listening to one of the audio files, looked up, his expression grim. "It gets worse. Listen to this." He played the recording, and Lily felt her blood run cold as she recognized Roderick Blackstone's smooth, cultured voice. "The Thompsons have become a problem. They're digging too deep, asking too many questions. We need to send a message. Make it look like an accident, but make sure it's done. And find that brat of theirs, we can't risk any loose ends." Tears streamed down Lily's face as the full impact of what she was hearing hit her. This was the proof, incontrovertible evidence that her parents had been murdered, and that she herself had been marked for death from the very beginning. But amidst her grief and anger, another emotion began to surface: determination. Her parents had died trying to expose this corruption, and Alexander had nearly followed in their footsteps. It was up to her now to see justice done. "We need to get this information to the authorities," Lily said, her voice steady despite the turmoil in her heart. "The real authorities, not the corrupt officials in Blackstone's pocket." Regina nodded, already reaching for her phone. "I have contacts in the FBI and the U.S. Attorney's Office. People I trust. We'll need to move quickly, though. Once we start this ball rolling, there's no telling how our enemies will react." As Regina made her calls and Detective Morrison coordinated with his superiors, Lily found herself drawn to a window overlooking the quiet Brooklyn street. The normalcy of the scene outside, people walking dogs, children playing, neighbors chatting, seemed surreal in contrast to the earth-shattering revelations happening within the safe house. Her thoughts drifted to Alexander, lying in his hospital bed, fighting for his life. She longed to be by his side, to tell him that his sacrifice hadn't been in vain, that they were on the verge of exposing the truth he had risked everything to uncover. But even as she yearned for Alexander, Lily knew that her place was here, in the heart of the storm. She was her parents' daughter, after all, and she would see their fight through to the end. The next few hours passed in a blur of activity. FBI agents arrived, poring over the evidence with increasing excitement and dismay. Plans were made, strategies discussed, and a complex operation began to take shape. As dawn broke over the city, casting a rosy glow over the skyline, Lily found herself standing before a gathering of stern-faced federal agents and prosecutors. With Regina by her side and the weight of her parents' legacy on her shoulders, she began to tell her story, not just the events of the past few weeks, but the entire sordid tale of corruption, murder, and betrayal that had shaped her life without her knowing. Meanwhile, across the city, other wheels were set in motion. In the opulent offices of Blackstone Enterprises, Roderick Blackstone received an urgent call that made the blood drain from his face. In precinct houses and government buildings throughout New York, honest officials who had long suspected something was rotten in the system prepared to move against their corrupt colleagues. And in a private hospital room, Alexander Blackwood's eyes fluttered open, his first conscious thought not of his own pain, but of Lily and the danger she might be facing. As the sun climbed higher in the sky, New York City stood on the brink of a seismic shift. The corrupt empire that had held sway for so long was about to crumble, and at the center of it all stood Lily Thompson, once a humble cleaning lady, now the catalyst for a revolution of justice. But even as hope dawned, dark forces were gathering for one last, desperate stand. Roderick Blackstone and his allies wouldn't go down without a fight, and they still had one card left to play, a final, terrible secret that could destroy everything Lily had fought for. As federal agents fanned out across the city, armed with warrants and the damning evidence from Alexander's flash drive, Lily found herself sequestered in a heavily guarded hotel suite. The adrenaline of the past few hours was beginning to wear off, leaving her exhausted but unable to rest. Her mind raced with everything that had happened, every revelation that had turned her world upside down. But through it all, one thought remained constant: Alexander. Despite Regina's assurances that he was under police protection at the hospital, Lily couldn't shake the feeling that he was still in danger. Just as she was about to give in to her exhaustion, a commotion outside her door snapped her back to alertness. She heard raised voices, a scuffle, and then an ominous silence. Heart pounding, Lily looked around for a weapon, anything she could use to defend herself. But before she could move, the door burst open, revealing a sight that made her blood run cold. Roderick Blackstone stood in the doorway, his usually impeccable appearance disheveled, a wild look in his eyes. And in his hand, pointed directly at Lily, was a gun. Well, Blackstone said, his cultured voice at odds with the madness in his eyes. The prodigal Thompson, at last. You've caused me quite a bit of trouble, my dear. Lily stood her ground, chin raised defiantly despite her fear. It's over, Blackstone. The authorities know everything. You can't possibly think you'll get away with this. Blackstone's laugh was hollow, devoid of any real humor. Oh, you'd be surprised what I can get away with, Miss Thompson. I've built empires and toppled governments. Did you really think a little girl playing detective could bring me down? As he advanced into the room, Lily's mind raced, searching for a way out of this nightmare. But Blackstone wasn't finished talking. You know, I almost admire your tenacity. You're so like your parents in that regard. It's almost a shame I'll have to kill you, just like I killed them. Lily's heart clenched at the casual admission of her parents' murder, but she forced herself to stay focused. She needed to keep him talking, to buy time for help to arrive. Why? She demanded. Why did you do it? They were good people, trying to make the world better. How could you destroy that? Something flickered in Blackstone's eyes, regret, perhaps, or a hint of the man he might have been in another life. Your parents were idealists, Miss Thompson. They believed in justice, in the system. But the world doesn't work that way. Power is everything, and I have sacrificed too much to let anyone take that power away from me. As Blackstone raised his gun, time seemed to slow for Lily. In that moment, she saw her life flash before her eyes, not just the hardships and struggles, but the moments of kindness, of love, of hope. She thought of her parents, of Regina, of Alexander. And then, just as Blackstone's finger tightened on the trigger, chaos erupted. The window behind Lily exploded inward as a SWAT team rappelled into the room. At the same moment, the door burst open again, revealing Detective Morrison and a team of FBI agents. In the ensuing mayhem, Lily dove for cover, her ears ringing from the sound of gunshots and shattering glass. When she finally dared to look up, she saw Blackstone on the ground, disarmed and in handcuffs, surrounded by a ring of grim-faced law enforcement officers. As the adrenaline began to fade, Lily felt herself trembling, the full impact of her brush with death hitting her all at once. But even as shock threatened to overwhelm her, a familiar voice cut through the chaos. Lily! Lily, are you all right? She turned, hardly daring to believe her ears, and there he was, Alexander Blackwood, pale and leaning heavily on a cane, but alive and looking at her with such naked concern that it made her heart skip a beat. Without thinking, Lily rushed to him, throwing her arms around him as tears of relief and joy streamed down her face. Alexander held her close, his own eyes suspiciously bright as he murmured words of comfort and apology. I'm so sorry, Lily, he whispered. For everything. When I woke up and they told me what was happening, I knew I had to find you. I couldn't let you face this alone. Lily pulled back just enough to look into his eyes, seeing in them a reflection of her own tumultuous emotions. You're here, she said softly. That's all that matters. As federal agents swarmed the room, securing evidence and leading the handcuffed Blackstone away, Lily and Alexander remained in their own world, clinging to each other as if afraid the other might disappear. But even as they reveled in their reunion, both knew that their journey was far from over. The exposure of Blackstone's conspiracy had sent shockwaves through New York's power structures, and the aftershocks would be felt for years to come. There would be trials and testimonies, threats and attempts at cover-ups. The road to justice would be long and fraught with dangers. But as Lily looked into Alexander's eyes, she knew that whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together. As dawn broke over a city in turmoil, Lily Thompson, once a mocked and underestimated cleaning lady, now the key to unraveling one of the biggest conspiracies in New York history, stood on the precipice of a new chapter in her life. With Alexander by her side and the memory of her parents giving her strength, she was ready to face whatever the future might hold. The final act of this extraordinary drama was about to unfold, promising revelations, redemption, and perhaps even a love strong enough to overcome the darkest of pasts. New York City, and indeed the world, would never be the same again. The months following Roderick Blackstone's dramatic arrest were a whirlwind of activity that kept New York City in a constant state of shock and anticipation. As the full extent of the conspiracy was revealed, the foundations of power in the city, and indeed, the country, were shaken to their core. Lily Thompson found herself at the center of it all, a reluctant celebrity thrust into the spotlight by circumstances beyond her control. Her story, from humble cleaning lady to heiress to whistleblower, captivated the public imagination, making her a symbol of hope and justice in a world that desperately needed both. But for Lily, the trials and testimonies, the endless interviews and public appearances, were secondary to the personal journey she was undertaking. With Alexander Blackwood by her side, she was learning to navigate not just her new public role, but also the complexities of a relationship born from the ashes of betrayal and redeemed by shared adversity. It was a crisp autumn morning, almost a year to the day since Alexander had first mocked her in the lobby of Goldstein Tower, when Lily found herself once again standing before that imposing building. But this time, she wasn't there as a cleaning lady or even as the woman who had brought down a corrupt empire. She was there to reclaim her heritage and to set right the wrongs of the past. As she walked through the revolving doors, her head held high, Lily couldn't help but reflect on the incredible journey that had brought her to this moment. The lobby fell silent as she passed, employees and visitors alike recognizing the woman whose face had been splashed across every newspaper and TV screen for months. Alexander was waiting for her by the elevators, looking dashing in a well-cut suit that couldn't quite hide the cane he still relied on, a permanent reminder of the bullet he had taken for her. As their eyes met, Lily felt the now familiar flutter in her heart, a mixture of love, gratitude, and a lingering touch of wariness that she wasn't sure would ever fully disappear. "Ready?" Alexander asked softly as she approached, offering his arm. Lily took a deep breath and nodded, slipping her hand into the crook of his elbow. "As I'll ever be." Together, they rode the elevator to the top floor, where the board of directors was waiting. The meeting that followed was both a formality and a seismic shift in the company's history. With the evidence Lily and Alexander had provided, the involvement of several board members in Blackstone's conspiracy had been exposed, leading to a major restructuring of the company's leadership. Now, as Lily took her seat at the head of the table, a seat that had once belonged to her father, she felt the weight of her parents' legacy settling on her shoulders. But it was a weight she was finally ready to bear. "Ladies and gentlemen," she began, her voice clear and confident, "today marks a new chapter not just for this company, but for the city we serve. We have an opportunity and a responsibility to rebuild trust, to show that business can be a force for good in the world." As Lily outlined her vision for the future of the company, emphasizing ethical practices, community investment, and corporate responsibility, she could almost feel her parents' presence in the room, their pride radiating through time and space. Alexander, seated to her right, watched with a mixture of admiration and something close to awe. The woman before him bore little resemblance to the timid cleaning lady he had once dismissed so callously. Lily Thompson had come into her own, a force of nature that both terrified and exhilarated him. As the meeting adjourned and the board members filed out, many stopping to shake Lily's hand or offer words of support, Alexander found himself hanging back, suddenly unsure of his place in this new world Lily was creating. Sensing his hesitation, Lily turned to him, her eyes softening as they met his. "Alexander? Is everything all right?" He managed a small smile, trying to hide the turmoil in his heart. "You were amazing in there, Lily. Your parents would be so proud." Lily stepped closer, reaching out to take his hand. "They would be proud of both of us," she said softly. "We've come a long way." Alexander's grip on her hand tightened almost imperceptibly. "Lily, I need to ask you something. Something I've been wanting to ask for a while now." Lily's heart began to race as Alexander reached into his pocket with his free hand, producing a small velvet box. Time seemed to stand still as he slowly lowered himself to one knee, wincing slightly at the strain on his injured leg. "Lily Thompson," he said, his voice thick with emotion, "you have changed my life in ways I never thought possible. You've shown me what true strength, compassion, and forgiveness look like. I know I don't deserve you, but if you'll have me, I promise to spend the rest of my life trying to be the man you believe I can be." He opened the box, revealing a stunning diamond ring. "Will you marry me?" For a moment, Lily was transported back to that fateful day in the lobby when this man had looked at her with such disdain. The journey from that moment to this seemed almost impossible, a tale too incredible for even the most dramatic of telenovelas. But as she looked into Alexander's eyes, seeing the love, the hope, and yes, the fear that shone there, Lily knew there was only one answer she could give. "Yes," she whispered, tears of joy streaming down her face. "Yes, Alexander, I'll marry you." As he slipped the ring onto her finger and rose to take her in his arms, Lily felt as if her heart might burst with happiness. They had weathered storms that would have broken lesser souls, faced down dangers that had threatened to tear them apart. But here they were, stronger for the trials they had endured, ready to face whatever the future might hold, together. Their kiss was interrupted by the sound of applause. They turned to see Regina Hawthorne standing in the doorway, a broad smile on her face. "I thought I might find you two here," she said, her eyes twinkling. "I hope I'm not interrupting?" Lily laughed, wiping away her tears as she held up her hand to show off the ring. "Regina! You're just in time to be the first to congratulate us." As Regina rushed forward to embrace them both, Lily was struck by how much her life had changed in such a short time. She had gained not just wealth and position, but a family, one forged in adversity and bound together by love and shared purpose. The next few weeks passed in a blur of celebration and planning. The news of Lily and Alexander's engagement took the city by storm, providing a much-needed happy ending to a story that had been filled with so much darkness. But even as they reveled in their joy, neither Lily nor Alexander forgot the responsibility they bore. The Thompson Blackwood Foundation, established with the combined resources of both families, quickly became a powerful force for positive change in the city, focusing on education, affordable housing, and support for whistleblowers and victims of corporate crime. On a warm spring day, with the city's elite and a host of grateful ordinary citizens in attendance, Lily Thompson and Alexander Blackwood were married in a ceremony that blended elegance with heartfelt emotion. As they exchanged vows, promising to love and support each other through whatever challenges life might bring, both felt the presence of those who had gone before: Lily's parents, the victims of Blackstone's conspiracy, and all those who had sacrificed in the name of justice. As they turned to face their guests, now husband and wife, Lily caught sight of a familiar face in the crowd. Detective Morrison, now promoted to captain, gave her a small nod and a smile. It was a reminder of how far they had come and of the debt they owed to those who had stood by them in their darkest hours. The reception that followed was a joyous affair, filled with laughter, tears, and heartfelt toasts. But for Lily and Alexander, the most poignant moment came when they slipped away from the festivities to visit a quiet corner of the garden where two newly planted trees stood side by side. "For Jonathan and Eleanor Thompson," read the small plaque at the base of the trees. "May their legacy of love and justice continue to grow and flourish." As Lily laid a bouquet of flowers beneath the plaque, Alexander's arm around her waist, she felt a sense of peace wash over her. The journey had been long and fraught with danger, but here, in this moment, she knew that everything had led to this, to love, to justice, and to a future bright with promise. "They would be so proud of you," Alexander murmured, pressing a kiss to her temple. Lily smiled, leaning into his embrace. "They would be proud of us," she corrected gently. "We did this together." As the sun began to set, painting the sky in hues of gold and pink, Lily and Alexander made their way back to their guests, ready to begin the next chapter of their lives. The path ahead was sure to hold its own challenges and adventures, but they would face them as they had faced everything else, side by side, their love a beacon of hope in a world that sometimes seemed all too dark. And so, as night fell over New York City, the tale of the arrogant man and the poor woman he had once mocked came to a close. But in many ways, their story was just beginning, a story of redemption, of justice, and of a love powerful enough to change not just 2 lives, but an entire city. For Lily Thompson Blackwood, once a humble cleaning lady and now a beacon of hope for thousands, the future stretched out before her, bright with possibility. And as she looked up at her husband, seeing in his eyes the same love and determination that burned in her own, she knew that together, they could face anything. The end of one chapter, the beginning of 1,000 more. A fairy tale for the modern age, proof that even in the darkest of times, love, justice, and the indomitable human spirit can triumph.